This is Behind the Verdict. I'm John Horford with Marion Cook and Christina Horford. I'm running out of things to call you. I don't want to laugh. I'm trying to... We can laugh before we start the episode.
Okay.
Right? Because today we're going over a case that, unfortunately, these types of incidents just continue to happen again and again and again in the United States. And they're all tragic. They're all, in theory, preventable if certain changes are made. And I'm not trying to push things one way or another. It's just a fact. It's been proven by other countries who have implemented measures to limit these sorts of incidents from happening. But we're talking about the Annunciation Catholic School shooting in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago. So on the morning of August 27th, 2025, students, parents, and parishioners gathered inside Annunciation Catholic Church for a school-wide mass. At 8:27 a.m., shots rang out. Chaos erupted. Children ran. Teachers shielded students. And within 4 minutes, Minneapolis police had entered the building. But by then, the damage was done. 2 children, 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel and 10-year-old Harper Moisky, were killed. 21 others were injured, including 18 children between the ages of 6 and 15 and 3 elderly parishioners. The gunman took her own life before police could apprehend her.
One of the things that really resonated when I read a lot of articles on this case was the fact that more lives were saved because right before the mass started, the church doors were locked.
But then,
So they couldn't get in.
But then the gunman just blindly shot inside.
Shot in through the windows.
Yeah, so
Right.
it's almost luck, though, that more people didn't get hit.
Well, if the gunman was able to come in.
And see people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, I'm not sure.
Is that not normal?
Not that I know of, but maybe that's a new thing. Maybe that's something that churches do nowadays because there has been a lot of mass shootings at church functions and events.
Yeah.
So a couple things about the shooter and just the process. Per Myrene's request, we're not going to say the shooter's name,
We'll just leave them as the shooter.
the shooter, but the shooter legally owned multiple firearms. So a rifle, a shotgun, and a handgun. And investigators found 116 rounds of spent rifle ammunition, shotgun shells, and I guess the handgun jammed during the attack.
116 rounds of spent, so it shot off through that window?
That's my understanding. But, one of the questions I have is what kind of window was it? Was it like a big giant bay window? Was it, a lot of Catholic churches often have like stained glass windows. How did they know where to shoot in at?
Probably didn't.
Or had watched people walk in, knew there was lots of people inside.
Or maybe had been there. Had they been there?
Well, so the thing was, the shooter's mother worked at the school as a secretary for decades and had just retired. But I believe the shooter themselves had gone to that Catholic school when they were younger.
Oh, so they're very familiar with it
So
then.
they were probably very familiar with the procedures, with how the mass might work, where people might be. But again, I'm still just a little curious about the type of window and size of window and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We could look up pictures of that or video of that and insert it just so people could get an idea of what that looked like. But beyond that, another thing that was pretty disturbing just about the whole scenario was when authorities recovered this individual's journals and found online postings, lots of anti-Semitic rants, anti-Christian hatred type stuff, racist comments, and glorification of other mass shooters. And the individual seemingly was obsessed with notoriety, and on their weapons inscribed references to previous mass murders, and in their notebook wrote about a desire to kill children specifically.
Was there any reasoning that they gave that they were able to link in those notebooks or the other writings to show why children were targeted?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So friends described recent emotional turmoil, a romantic breakup, struggles with gender identity, and other signs of deteriorating mental health. Whether those are specifically the reason, we don't know.
Could be a combination of
Why
all
it
of
was children.
Well, so all of those things you just said make me question one thing. So if this shooter had gone to the school, maybe the shooter as a younger child had started to have feelings of different gender identification, and maybe they were bullied as a result of that, which would be one reason why they might fixate on children, because maybe they felt like they weren't supported. They were picked on for trying to be their own true self, I suppose. But the other piece of what you said, an emotional breakup shouldn't be something that triggers this, but I think the biggest key factor is you said mental health concerns or issues.
Yeah.
That's what the friends were saying the shooter was having before the shooting happened. And I think mental health is one of the absolute biggest reasons we see cases like this.
Especially if you're struggling with gender identity in a society that's not always the most welcoming to people with gender identity issues. And then they mentioned the anti-Christian sentiment. The Christian church isn't always the most welcoming to people who are having those types of identity crises. So if you were an individual, to your point, you weren't accepted, you weren't loved, you had issues with the children, the people who ran the church really didn't accept you, you could absolutely harbor that sort of resentment against that institution and the people that participate within it.
How old were they, though, when they passed?
23.
Still young, but I mean, grown up enough.
Do you think there's any connection with the timing that the shooter's mom had retired from working at the school before the shooting happened, so the mom wouldn't have been there that day?
Could have been, but then if the mom was a secretary, she probably wouldn't have been in when they were in mass. Would
She might have still gone to mass.
I guess she could have.
I mean,
yeah,
it's
I
open
don't
to the
know.
public
Yeah.
too. It's certainly open to other school employees.
But if she's working during that time, are you allowed to just, I don't know. I guess that's something specific that you wouldn't know unless you understood the dynamics of that specific institution.
Because it seemed like the mom of the shooter supported their new gender identification because she signed off when the shooter was a minor to change their name from one gender to another. And the mom indicated that was something that the shooter had wanted to do themselves. So it appears, at least, that the mom supported that change. But maybe the shooter felt the school or Catholicism in general did not support it.
Yeah.
Which is
Is
probably true in a lot of
probably true.
cases.
How many guns were used in this?
3
3.
and 1 jammed.
One jammed. And when were they purchased?
They were all purchased legally. I don't know if I actually have when this individual got a hold of the guns. I just have some of the laws that just back up the legality of an individual this age owning those guns. And there was nothing illegal owned by this individual, I believe.
Yeah.
That's my understanding, too. All of the weapons were purchased legally and rightfully according to the laws at the time.
I just want to circle back to when I said they should have sought help, but I feel like it's I feel like it's easier to get your hands on a gun than it is for some people to get counseling or you know what I mean?
One of the difficulties, too, a lot of times is you may not have people who specialize in gender identification or different types of things, but there is I would call it a mental health crisis where there are not enough professionals for people who need assistance, or the professionals that are available don't have the availability because they're helping so many other people that there's a backlog. And I think that has been a huge, huge problem in a lot of these school shooting type cases where the shooter may have needed some counseling, may have needed some help. And we've seen that happen in other cases, particularly the one in Michigan in Oxford.
And in that specific case, obviously, there were just some massive oversights, like the parents coming in, the individual obviously having the drawings. Were they drawings?
They were drawings, but it was very graphically detailed drawings of shooting and blood and a lot of things like that just seemingly were not paid as close attention as one might think should have been.
Yeah, especially, and then they didn't even search that individual's bags or locker or belongings, because if they had at the time.
Well, it's my understanding in the Oxford case, the school wanted the parents to take that child home for the day, and the parents refused.
But even at that point, if you're going to allow that individual to stay after they've showed that they have a thought or a desire to commit harm to people, you would at least make sure that they don't have anything on them so they can't harm themselves first, and then they can't harm others.
Well, and we don't know if they asked those questions or they did search some things or maybe things were hidden. I don't recall all of those details specifically.
Yeah, and I could be misremembering, but I just thought in that case, because that wasn't the case that we researched, this is just us bringing up a case that's just coming to mind. I thought the individual had the gun that they used to commit that shooting
In Oxford?
on them.
I think they had it in their backpack.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But I don't know if they searched other things or they had it on their person and then they put it in the backpack, or they had it in their locker and then put it in their backpack. I don't know what was searched or when.
Yeah, but you would just think, especially nowadays with the whole push, I mean, there are even schools that were talking about having clear backpacks just so you could see what's inside it. And then this individual showing that they have an interest in committing harm to a large group of people, and then you don't even check the backpack. But I mean, maybe they did. I don't know. Or
Right.
we didn't research that case.
We didn't know that part, but it just kind of came up here.
Yep, exactly. So what in this case though, were there warning signs? There seemed to be. Classmates mentioned this individual using Nazi salutes as early as middle school, openly talking about other mass shooters.
Now, the Nazi salute thing is not good, is awful, right? But does that necessarily mean it's a red flag that they're going to become a school shooter?
No, but it's a red flag in general.
It is a red flag in general, but I think you have to look closer at now they are elevating other school shooters to seemingly a degree of honor, or looking at them in a way that they are wanting to emulate that, to mimic or mock doing the same thing for the same notoriety. I think that certainly were red flags. But did that information come out before the shooting?
That was known by classmates. It said that classmates as early as middle school had known about the anti-Semitic stuff related to this individual. Other anti-Semitic phrases that were found on the weapons, one of them said 6 million wasn't enough.
Jesus.
And then I guess this is the anti-Semitic, but another weapon had the words "kill Donald Trump" on it.
But that's interesting. If it's anti-Semitic behavior or rhetoric that's being thrown out, they didn't choose a synagogue.
No.
They chose a Catholic church.
Yeah.
Which I think goes back to
The personal experience.
the personal experience more than that piece of things people seem to remember about them.
The shooter did leave behind a manifesto and a video online. In the writings, the shooter blamed a former romantic partner, calling her the root of their suffering. Also, the shooter wrote bitterly about their mother, linking her to the struggles around their gender transition. And there are passages about drug use, depression, and feeling abandoned. Most disturbing of all, federal prosecutors revealed that this individual was obsessed with killing children. In the notes, they fantasized about massacres in places where kids would feel safe, such as schools, churches, and playgrounds.
But again, why focusing on children? I mean, that part is just seemingly so
Evil.
evil, but also not proportionate with their feelings about gender misidentification, unless you go back to the fact that they were bullied when they were young.
Right,
That's
but
the
why
only
take it out
thing
on
that-
kids now?
And not the
It's
people
just
who had bullied you.
Because they're stuck in maybe in that mindset, in that kind of age range. They're stuck there. And it was the people at school who did this, so I'm going to get other people at school so they won't be able to bully anybody like me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with something here because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Mental health issues cause people to do things that can be extremely irrational. There was a PBS NewsHour article that I was reading, and they were talking about how the shooter was acknowledging their own inner conflict, and in their private writings described what they were feeling as profound depression, and they had admitted to having long-time plans of committing a mass shooting. And one haunting line that they mentioned within that was, "I know this is wrong, but I can't seem to," and then an ellipsis after. So it's unfinished, but there's obviously a lot of turbulence and struggle and going back and forth and trying to find a way to find peace. Unfortunately, this individual chose one of the most horrific ways you can humanly possibly go about.
Well, initially in the beginning of this episode, I thought perhaps the mom had been supportive of the shooter and the gender identification change, but as it turns out from their writings, it sounds like maybe mom did a little bit of support, but it sounds like the shooter was upset with the mom. That's what you just said, right?
But sometimes it never feels like enough. Who knows what the actual
be.
reality of the situation is, and I don't think we know the specifics of that, and those things may come to light. It's still fairly fresh.
Right after the shooting happened, you know, the news media nationally goes over every detail that they have. They show photos from the scene, not inside the church, but outside, and all of the emergency personnel pulled up outside and the lights and everything. But one of the photos really caught my attention. It was a mom who had basically looked like office type clothing on, and she was carrying heels in each hand, running barefoot as fast as she could towards the church.
Yeah, I saw
you see
that. I
that?
did. Yeah, it's a powerful picture. We'll throw that in here.
It's very powerful. I can't imagine your children are at that school. You hear there's a shooting and nobody can tell you what's happened or if your child's safe or not safe.
Yeah, it's an absolute nightmare.
And she couldn't get there fast enough wearing the heels, so she took them off and ran barefoot.
Yeah. Oof. I mean, I can't even imagine. I don't have kids, but terrifying. And we're not going to get into the statistics necessarily in this episode. The next episode we're going to talk more about just school shootings and just that crisis in general in the United States. And we'll throw in more statistics and things that, other countries do, and just some numbers that are just alarming in relation to these instances continuing to happen in the United States and people acting like there's nothing we can do to prevent them when there's very clearly things that could be done and have been done around the world to prevent these types of tragedies from occurring. But people in the United States are just not willing to do what it takes to limit these kids being in danger. And
Well,
it sounds harsh.
I think there's a little more to it we can get into in the next episode.
We'll get into the next episode, but I mean, it's pretty clear cut.
Depends on how you look at it.
Do you care more about your guns or do you care more about kids being killed?
It's not just about the guns, though. There's more to it.
It's this is something that doesn't happen everywhere. So, all right, what else do we need to touch on?
Do we know how badly injured or if they were critical the other 21 people were? I know that 2 students were killed, 2 young students.
Very young, 8 and 10, Fletcher and Harper.
Yesterday, a coward decided to take our 8-year-old son Fletcher away from us. Because of their actions, we will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him, and watch him grow into the wonderful young man who's on the path to becoming. Fletcher loved his family, friends, fishing, cooking, and any sport that he was allowed to play. While the hole in our hearts and lives will never be filled, I hope that in time our family can find healing. I pray that the other victim's family can find some semblance of the same. I'm hopeful that all the wounded are able to make a full recovery and return home to their families. And finally, all the people, and especially the children, impacted by this horrific event are able to recover mentally and find strength to live loving, happy, and full lives. Over the past day, I've heard many stories accounting the swift and heroic actions of children and adults alike from inside the church. Without these people and their selfless actions, this could have been a tragedy of many magnitudes more. For these people, I am thankful. Moving forward, we ask not for your sympathy, but your empathy. As our family and the Annunciation community grieve and try to make sense of such a senseless act of violence. Please remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life. Give your kid an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
We're seeing a story of a kid talking to the news right after it happened that one of his classmates had covered him, like laid down over him, and his classmate got shot and has recovered. But still, I'm like, we're in this world that children are sacrificing themselves for other children. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
It was just-
I mean, that child wanted to protect their friend or their
Can you
classmate.
imagine? Like, just, that's amazing that he just, in that moment, just immediately was like trying to protect another, I think, younger kid,
Yeah, and I can't help but go back to what we promised not to bring up till the next episode. But fine, if people aren't willing to get rid of guns, then we should be going all in on making sure that we have enough access to resources in this country so people who are struggling can get the help that they need, and the professionals that provide those services are well compensated, and they're also getting the resources that they need, because burnout's super high in those types of professions.
Burnout and vicarious trauma from dealing with that day in
Absolutely.
and day out can be something that weighs on people very heavily.
So-
I think that weighs on prosecutors a lot too.
Yeah. Tell us how it is,
admit
Myrain.
I admit it.
Yeah.
It's hard day in and day out. I mean, if you think you go to work and maybe you work as a florist and, your good day is you made beautiful bouquets. Your bad day is you didn't get as much done or the flowers you wanted didn't come in. That's not good for your business, right? But in law enforcement or prosecution or those who counsel people who need assistance, a good day is because you help somebody. A bad day is much, much worse. And those are things, as much as I try to get out of my head, the bad cases, the negatives, the photographs I've had to see, the absolute trauma to people, it's hard to let go. It really is.
I believe it. I think about that often, actually, whenever I'm watching like a murder doc and they have like certain things blurred and stuff, and I think about you, and like you have to look at all of those photos, like the actual, like I have never seen anything like that, and I can't imagine even just witnessing that.
If you asked me a particular name of any of the homicide cases I've done over the years, I could immediately just look away for a second and see all of the photographs of the scene, the deceased, the victim, what happened, how it happened. I can see all those photographs in my head.
And that's 25 years.
That's horrible.
Right.
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 Yeah.
So it's a lot.
It's a long time. Yeah. It's a lot. But again, that's more money. It's more resources. That's more care and attention. Like something has to give. If it's not the guns, it has to be that.
There has to be more care and attention, and
Has to
not
be.
just in these cases, but in general, there
Yeah.
has to be more
100%.
for the
Yeah.
people who handle this kind of thing.
Yeah. So we can get in that. And I'm the one who keeps saying that, and then I keep bringing it up. I know we mentioned it briefly earlier, but, was the shooter old enough to own these guns? Yes, the shooter was old enough to own these guns. And under Minnesota law, nothing about that individual's background would have raised a red flag. So the system worked exactly the way that it was designed to. But this 23-year-old who was filled with hate and violent fantasies was still able to get these guns, go to the church, and let off 116 rounds.
Do we know how close the shooter was to the school?
I'm not sure, actually.
Like, I'm just curious, were they like on a building nearby, or was it like ground level window that they shot through?
I mean, they had a handgun that they tried to shoot but jammed, so you're not going to shoot a handgun from like 100 yards, 200 yards away.
Right. I was just curious
Yeah.
like how close it was.
So I'm guessing that just based on that, I'm guessing it was
my-
close enough to try to fire a handgun.
My recollection of the church from the outside, it looked like it was an old school brick kind of stone type of church. It seemed like you had to go up some steps to get into the front door, so it didn't seem like it was all at ground or first floor level. But maybe they were in part of the church that was? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. So a question I keep thinking is a system that allows an individual like this to legally acquire firearms a system that works?
There was nothing that they could have looked at to say it was a red flag or not. This person didn't have a criminal background. They didn't
Nope.
have any mental health prior commitments. There wasn't anything that could have been flagged. This could have been just general, everyday Joe or Jill citizen who wanted to go out and target practice or something else.
I mean, besides the anti-Semitism stuff, but of course, unless you actually
But there was nothing for law enforcement to see,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or the
And that started-
agencies that would regulate whether or not you can purchase a gun, like gun boards or gun review panels or whatever. Some
But I think
places have them.
that's kind of also the point of the question, right? Like, is that a system that works?
Should
when
we
it-
have to do like a mental health evaluation
screening something
before you get a gun?
this
type of
individual,
thing?
yeah, or like a genuine background check?
Like, what would have stopped this? Like,
Yeah.
where in the process of them like
Finding
acquiring
their-
and going to that church?
Yeah, but you're saying a genuine background check. In this case, there
not a background check, like a mental health evaluation.
Well,
Yeah.
that's different. But a background
Yeah.
check is something different. They're not going to find anything if there's no background to locate.
Yeah, I mean,
They're not going to go back to your middle school friends or people you knew and say, "Hey, did they ever say anything negative or violent?"
Another question: because this individual didn't have a record with law enforcement, could anything have been done to prevent this? Were there some warning signs? Yep, there were violent writings, there were manifestos, there was an obsession with mass shooters, but were they widely known beyond this individual's private journals?
Doesn't seem
Well,
like
it
it.
doesn't sound like it. Sounds like
Probably
people may
not.
have heard them, talking about mass shooters, but the manifesto probably wasn't read by anyone else. It was probably a private journal or private writings at least. So there wouldn't have been a way that I can see rationally at this point that they would have, that law enforcement or any officials, public officials would have known to prevent those weapons from being sold to that person.
Yeah, and no one in this individual's life, including this individual's mother, filed a petition that would have set off the red flag laws that do exist in some states. You mentioned that. Actually, I think you mentioned it off air.
Yeah, I did. So there are some states that do have red flag laws when someone has something in their background or some concerning behavior where law enforcement can actually go and take weapons. In Michigan, we refer to it as ERPO. It's emergency protection orders that can have law enforcement actually confiscate weapons from someone if there's a concern for that. But it's a very difficult process, and I don't know if they had something like that in Minnesota. But we also don't know for sure exactly what the mother knew as far as the mental health. There may be things we just don't know because it hasn't come out. Or maybe the mom just knew the person was struggling with gender identification but didn't realize the rest of it, trying to connect it to violent tendencies or behavior.
Yeah, and maybe a parent's just being a parent. Maybe the mother was aware that their child had these guns and did have this anger. There's no way the mom didn't know that this child had deep, deep identity issues and anger and resentment towards the church. You just can't convince me that the mom didn't know that. But does that
I'm
mean,
not saying the mom didn't know that.
No,
I'm saying
I
the mom
know.
didn't know maybe the violent tendencies and emulating the mass shooters.
Yes.
That piece.
Yes. And a mother's a mother. Like, you never think that your child's going to be a mass shooter, usually. There are plenty of them.
But I don't know that children always let on the really horrible, bad thoughts that they're having to their parents, because those are people who would say something, who could say something, who could prevent you if they knew ahead of time. I don't know that this mother knew that piece, and that piece may have been the missing part of the puzzle.
It could be, but people usually show, and I'm not saying that it means that they're going to be a mass shooter, but people usually show signs, and like, oh, they have a tendency to be violent or aggressive in certain ways.
Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't.
I've had plenty of cases where parents of defendants I've convicted for really, really bad things, murders and other really bad crimes, knew maybe their kid had some issues as far as socially feeling not acceptable, but didn't have an inkling whatsoever about the violent piece that came along after. Had no idea. And I am usually a pretty critical person if I believe or don't believe one way or the other. But in the cases I'm talking about, I really don't think the parents knew. I don't.
Yeah. And it goes both ways.
It can.
I mean, I'm not that old, but I have 15 years of experience in the developmental space working with kids, and they're absolutely kids that it's just like this kid. I'm not saying that they would be like a school shooter or anything like that, but they need help. Sometimes it's just very obvious which kids need access to mental health resources. They need more love at home. They need something.
Well, I think that's a big piece of our next episode is talking about resources.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. So go ahead.
Yeah, really quick. I was going to say, I wonder what the shooter's internet history browser looked like. Like I think the internet connects us in a lot of great ways, but I think it also connects a lot of people like that who are like-minded and maybe add fuel to the fire and maybe justify some of those violent tendencies. And I think non-supervised internet access sometimes can, make it so much worse.
Yeah. But then where do you draw that line in terms of what people have access to on the internet?
No, I say access to the gun. Who needs an assault rifle? Like, I'm not even trying to come for your handguns for like protection in your house, but like they fired 116 rounds in how long? Probably took seconds, maybe a minute.
Less than 4 minutes.
That's insane. Like, and then they couldn't get into the school, so if they didn't have a gun in general, it never would have happened, because people say, oh, well, they can stab them with a knife, but in this case, they wouldn't have been able to. So I just think assault rifle alone, like, why the fuck do random regular people, why do we need these?
We can get, I guess we can.
Sorry, we don't have to get into that now.
For the 17th time this episode, we'll get into that in the next episode. I want to talk about it now.
We can wrap this one up.
No, there are some other things. There's a couple more things that I wanted to talk about. So, a couple questions. How do we balance Second Amendment rights with community safety? Do our current red flag systems actually work? And do people even know how to use them? To your point earlier, they can be confusing.
They can be. It's confusing.
State by state?
Yeah, it's state by state.
So that makes it even more confusing.
Yeah.
And especially if you're in a border area. So like the county I work in now borders another state. And so people coming from that state often think, oh, well, in, for example, Indiana, I can open carry my pistol because Indiana allows it. You cross over that border into Michigan, you can no longer do that. That's now a 5-year felony.
Right.
So, I think that is confusing too.
Yeah.
When there are different laws. That being said, you're never going to get all 50 states to agree to the exact same set of laws for every last thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's hard too, because you would think there would be a national standard for like high capacity magazines and assault style rifles. And to your point, it's just going to be so difficult to get all 50 states on the same page.
Well, they don't have the same laws for pretty much most anything. Everything is different.
Yeah. But I feel like this is something, to your point, Christina.
It's the number one killer of kids, guns.
That's one of the top statistics in the next episode for the 18th time. Yeah, it is. It's the leading cause of death for kids.
I was just laughing after saying that. God damn it.
Well, because it's so ridiculous that people aren't more disgusted by it. Like disgusted to the point where it's like enough is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like something needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Some extreme measure in some way. And even if it's not getting rid of every gun, it's making sure that every gun is locked up and insured, and there's a penalty, a severe penalty.
But I think in the next episode we have to get into more than just taking all the guns away. There are other issues here at play that we really have to focus on that would help.
There are
a lot of different avenues.
But usually when you take all the guns away, school shootings don't happen anymore. Go figure. So real quick, let's finish this episode up with the legislative response. So Governor Tim Walz has announced a special session of the state legislature, and they may have already had this. I wrote this script a couple days ago, but his proposed package has a ban on assault-style weapons, safe storage requirements for firearms, mandatory liability insurance for gun owners, and an expansion of Minnesota's red flag laws, making it easier to remove guns from people deemed dangerous.
So I wonder how long before the shooting did they purchase the guns? Because was there even time for a red flag law to, I know that's just one aspect of what you just said, but to kick in?
I think it's really hard in all of these school shooting cases, the Minnesota case or the others, to try to look at it retroactively and say what was missed. Sometimes the red flags are glaring, like, oh, people should have seen this. You should have saw that coming. But on the other hand, without knowledge that we have now of the manifesto, knowledge that we have to link what classmates said to the gender identification issue to other pieces, it's really hard when you only have one piece of a giant puzzle. I've used that analogy so many times in trial. You look at one piece of a puzzle and it's blue. You don't know what that is until you put all of those pieces, connecting it together, and now you see it's part of the blue sky or the blue ocean or something like that. But you need to have all the pieces connect. If you don't, then you don't have a full picture. I think that's the hard part, because in hindsight, we want to think we have the full picture.
I think you're 100% right. And because you're 100% right, the one thing that you can do in that case to make a difference is limit access to guns and limit access to specific types of guns.
I think it's hard to force anyone to seek mental health help too. You know what I mean? Like, most people who are not mentally okay don't even know that they're not mentally okay.
And a lot of times they may not tell somebody how much they're struggling. Maybe the mom in this case knew they were struggling with gender identification, but that doesn't necessarily equate to, gosh, they shouldn't have guns, if you don't know about the violent tendency. Maybe someone is upset about something else. But my point in bringing that up was, I think it's very difficult when we look at these cases after the fact to try to figure out what the reasoning was before the fact.
Which is why, if you just remove the access to guns...
But that's not the only issue.
But that is the main issue.
It is one of the issues.
It is the main issue.
It's one of the issues we'll get into in the next episode.
All right, we're going to wrap this up so we can get to the next episode. If you have any questions, or if we missed some glaring detail in relation to this case, let us know. BTV_pod, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the places.
Listen to our next episode and let us know what you think are other ways that this issue can be eradicated in the United States. We need to make sure that our children are safe no matter where they're at.
Pray for me. I think that me and Marianne are about to have a showdown in this next episode.
I think we're going to spar.
You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.